Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, on top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
Breaking news! Liverpool have been crowned Premier League champions for this season. Psych. April Fools, everybody. I had to. Was that a good one? You know what? Let's just get on with the show. Welcome to it. This is ZiFM Sport on a Wednesday. Wacky Wednesday, the lockdown edition. From their homes, you'll hear from Barry Manandi, Mike Madoda, Mark Poz, Chris, and Alois Bungira. I'm the producer. My name is Sean Tafirenyika. I hope you're staying at home and keeping safe as we fight against the spread of the coronavirus. You know, sports has a way of making an impression on us, leaving lasting memories and untold where were you when that happened type of moments. Now tonight on ZiFM Sport, the Z team will take us through some of Zimbabwe's most inspirational sporting events. We'll also have a local sports update, around the world in 60, and our Power Play Plus updates from the beautiful game. Hit us up on social media. The handle is at ZiFM Sport on Facebook and Twitter. Tell us what your most inspirational sporting event was.
Hi, my name's Ryan Kens, Sunshine Tour professional golfer, and you're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Zimbabwe has had a lot of inspirational and historic sporting events. Where were you in 1996 when the Zimbabwe cricket team whitewashed England? Where were you in 1995 during the All Africa Games? Where were you in 1998 when Dynamo stormed to the final of the CAF Champions League? Where were you in 2000 when Zimbabwe hosted Andre Agassi and the US in the Davis Cup? And where were you last year when the Zimbabwe netball team, the Gems, made their debut at the Netball World Cup? Well, I know people who were there. For example, Mike was at the Davis Cup in 2000.
The year is 2000, and who should come knocking on our door? Who should come visiting? Who should land on these shores? None other than the American Davis Cup team led by Andre Agassi. Back then, the United States of America was the biggest tennis-playing nation in the world, the most successful with the biggest names. Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, Michael Chang, Jim Courier, just some of the household names you'd get out of American sport. And of course, Andre Agassi led a team here into Zimbabwe to take on the Black brothers, Byron and Wayne, as well as Kevin Elliott, in a weekend of tennis at the City Sports Center. And what a fantastic weekend it was. What a showcase of Zimbabwe sport it was. Just to jog your memory, just to remind you what happened on day one, on the Friday. Zimbabwe and the United States of America sharing one match each. Okay, one match each. Andre Agassi winning his match, but John Woodruff was beaten in his match, meaning that they went into day two 1-1 at level pegging. Then Zimbabwe really setting the cat amongst the pigeons, winning the doubles encounter in that game. Of course, it was a match which Byron Black and Kevin Elliott were able to beat Alex O'Brien and Rick Leach in that doubles game. So America went into day three on the Sunday under all sorts of pressure. And then Andre Agassi showing his experience. He delivered. And then John Woodruff as well. He came into that match under all sorts of pressure. Having lost on day one, he won his game, meaning that the United States of America edged it out 3-2 versus Zimbabwe. People hadn't expected Zimbabwe to take the Americans deep in that contest, but Zimbabwe managed to do that. And America was under all sorts of pressure. There was also the added side story that the non-playing captain, John McEnroe, the legendary John McEnroe, That was his first encounter as captain. He was under a lot of scrutiny. He was under a lot of discussion in the United States of America. He had to win that one if he was to get his tenure off to a winning and non-controversial start. And so he managed to do that. And he was under all sorts of pressure throughout the weekend, got involved in a lot of skirmishes with the umpires, something that was characteristic of John McEnroe during his time as a player. But it just showed that he was under pressure, and that pressure was coming from Zimbabwe. That pressure was coming from Byron Black, from Wayne Black, from Kevin Elliott, as Zimbabwe really ramped up the pressure. The City Sports Centre was the venue. It was the setting just on the outskirts of the main CBD in Harare. It held 4,000 fans that came to the venue on the Friday, on the Saturday, on the Sunday, in a carnival festival of tennis. It was multiracial, multicultural. It was colorful. It was loud. It was noisy. There were songs that were sung. There were traditional dancers. There were drum beaters on the Sunday, and it really created a raucous, intimidating atmosphere. It's one of the greatest weekends of sport that we have ever seen in Zimbabwe. So very, very inspirational for me. I mean, I was just, 20 years old. I was in Harare. I was at the University of Zimbabwe. Managed to go in to take in the action. It was affordable back then, to be honest. The economy was a lot stronger. So me and my mates nipped over to the City Sports Centre to take in on the action. Missed our lectures on Friday afternoon because we wanted to watch the tennis, and we could afford to do that being at university. But it was absolutely fantastic, and I loved everything about it. And I remember Andre Agassi's match with Wayne Black. I mean, that match was something to behold. A couple of dodgy umpiring calls, some line calls, because Andre Agassi was under the pump from Wayne Black. Wayne Black was punching way above his weight, and he played the game of his life. I mean, it was a battle of baseline punching, and eventually Andre Agassi got over the line, and he did struggle, Agassi. I mean, he had just come out of Australia, where he had won the Australian Open the previous weekend, so he was bang on form. But he came to Zimbabwe, and what he faced is something that he was not used to facing. He faced a Zimbabwe team that was highly motivated, a Zimbabwe team that had plenty of skill as well to go with the motivation, and a Zimbabwe team that was backed by a raucous crowd. I'll remind you, 4,000 drum-beating fans that were singing all the time between points. And then there was the geographical aspect that Andre Agassi had to overcome, and that was the elevation, the altitude in Harare. Harare located a lot higher than most of the venues that Andre Agassi is playing at, or was playing at that time. So he overcame that, and he was able to beat Wayne Black. But that match was an absolutely fantastic game, and it was an advertisement for Zimbabwe tennis, an advertisement for Zimbabwe sport, just like the entire weekend was. And when I look back at the weekend, why I call it, for me, my most inspirational event in terms of Zimbabwe sport. I mean, we introduced ourselves to the world as brand Zimbabwe. We did a lot, not just to get respect from the tennis world, from a sporting point of view, but we showcased the culture of our land, the warm and friendly as well as hospitable nature of our people. It was also a weekend of unity between races, as it was a multi-racial affair at the City Sports Centre. And remember, this came at the time of a racial tension, because this was at the time when, of course, there was the land question, the land grabs were going on. But had you gone to the City Sports Centre that weekend, you wouldn't have been able to tell that there was a bit of underlying racial tension in the land. Then from an administrative capacity, I thought that we showcased our ability to host international standard sport events as well as global sports stars. I mean, we had high caliber administrators back then. Tennis Zimbabwe led by the late Paul Chingoka, who was the man at the helm and the man, of course, who led the team that organized that event. Absolutely fantastic caliber of administrator back then. And if you take a look at the infrastructure and support services, they were on point. City Sports Center as a venue, the practice facilities that were availed to the Americans, the hotels, as well as the security at the venue. The only thing for me is that post that event, I thought that we missed out on opportunity for Tennis Zimbabwe to pursue Zimbabwe's right to host an ATP Tour event that could have become a regular feature in Zimbabwe, in Harare, because we had the facilities, we had the administrators, we had the name, and we certainly had the local players that could put their hand up and, of course, be some of the marquee participants in that particular event. So I thought that was an opportunity missed. You know, we kind of like sat back and we said, hey, we hosted this great event, gave ourselves a pat on the back, but we could have pursued more in the weeks and the months that followed that event. Also want to take a look at corporate partnerships and sponsorships. You know, back then, it was all too apparent at that event that corporate Zimbabwe, you know, they were going to take the opportunity to showcase their brands, their services and products to a local and international audience. You know, they seized on that opportunity. And we had marketers back then that knew the value of sport as a marketing partner. And it's something that I think our marketers nowadays need to take a long, hard look at themselves and see if they're missing out on the opportunities that sport avails. Then for the fans were at the very heart of this event, and it was a magical weekend for tennis fans and sports fans in general. I was not a big tennis fan. I was just a sports fan. I was more a footy guy. My favorite sport is rugby. I love my cricket back there. The Australian cricket team was at its peak and performing and doing wonders. So I'm a cricket and rugby fan and then football fan. But this was a global tennis event that as a sports fan I had to attend, and there was exposure to the biggest star in the game in Andre Agassi and one of the legendary icons of the sport in John McEnroe. 3 days of non-stop action, and it turned out to be a competitive affair in which those fans that attended certainly got bang for their buck. I mean, who would have thought it would end 3-2? Who would have thought it would end with the United States sweating on that result? But they were pushed all the way by the Black brothers and Kevin Elliott. And then the fan experience itself as well. You know, it was second to none. There was ease of entry, security in and out of the venue, friendly and helpful shores, and there was plenty of entertainment at the City Sports Center. Oh my goodness. The year 2000, Zimbabwe versus the United States of America in the Davis Cup. A weekend that we will always remember. A weekend that will always be inspirational.
That Davis Cup team, Byron Black, Chidembo, Wayne Black, Shumba, Kevin Elliott, Nyamanza, they were absolutely special. Now, Mike mixed up the Black brothers in the doubles. It was actually Wayne that teamed up with Kevin Elliott and not Byron. It's unfortunate that we fell a little bit short, but it would have been sweeter if we'd beaten the United States. Now, fun fact, my father, Enoch Tafirinyika, he was a linesman in that Davis Cup tie in 2000. He got to meet one of his favorite tennis players at the time, Andre Agassi. And another little known fact is tennis legend Pete Sampras. He pulled out of the tour to Zimbabwe last minute because of a hip injury. Otherwise, it would have been Sampras and Agassi leading the attack against Zimbabwe in Harare. But still, that weekend in February 2000 is certainly historic. Let's switch gears to 1998. The Glamour Boys lived up to their name as Dynamos had an unprecedented run to the CAF Champions League final. Let's hear more on that from Barry.
Now, what can I say about my historical moment? Well, that Dynamos team of 1998. Wow. Well, for what began as a foray into the treacherous and often unrewarding waters of African football, now this was to turn into a moment in time where the legions of Dynamos fans were allowed to dream. That's me included. And that legion, some say, is about 7 million. Now, to dream of the team that they had loved for many years, the team that had brought countless memories to their hearts, being crowned the champions of Africa. This was to be a journey as storied and with plot turns that made it almost as if somebody had scripted this somewhere and knew how it would end, and every Dynamos fan was living through this drama, wishing that this was going to be the epic victory of the little man. Yet it turned out to be the glorious failure, albeit on the final hurdle of the little train that could. It was 1998, and Dynamos, by virtue of being champions of Zimbabwe, had the task of representing the country in the CAF Champions League. Remember, at this stage, the competition had a different format to its present iteration. A preliminary first and second round qualifiers would be played on a home and away basis, and the teams that would remain would be split into two 4-team mini-leagues, the winner of each qualifying for a two-legged final. Little did Chazunguza faithful and the country at large know that this band of blue and white army would go all the way. Given the country's ranking on the continent, there was no need to participate in the preliminary qualifiers, which was reserved for the likes of little-known Saint-Louisien of Réunion, Walidan FC of the Gambia, and the likes of Ethiopian Coffee Sports Club of Ethiopia, which, before you laugh, after qualifying into the first round, knocked out the mighty Egyptian champions Al Ahly courtesy of a 3-all aggregate scoreline and progressed via the away goals rule, having earned a 2-all draw in Egypt. They did, however, fall in the second round of the qualifiers. It is in this first round that Dynamos joined the fray, dispatching Malawi inside Telkom Wanderers 2-1 in the home leg, and then repeating the feat of a 2-1 away win in Blantyre to progress 4-2 on aggregate. Being drawn against Ferroviario di Maputo in the second qualifying round was never going to be an easy feat, but after the Mozambicans held Dynamos to a 1-all draw at the National Sports Stadium, the Maputo team went into the second leg at their home patch with a spring in their step. I dare say at that stage, only a few Dynamos fans allowed themselves to dream, not possibly of winning the tournament, but just of qualifying for what was called by the Herald at the time the money-spinning mini-league phase of the Champions League. This would place this group of Dynamos players on a course to greatness. But an away assignment against a team carrying an away goal was never going to be easy, and it would take the heroics of the diminutive goalkeeper George Mandizhidza pulling off a miraculous Gordon Banks-type save to earn Dynamos the 1-0 victory that ensured they would be one of the 8 teams on the continent in the draw for the mini-league phase. We all listened intently on local radio as it became apparent that Dynamos would win in Maputo, and it was roundly celebrated by Dynamos fans. But given that there were 6 tough group games that awaited, I don't think anyone, certainly not me, thought there was a chance that Dynamos would be in the final. Worse still, when the 2 groups were drawn, Dynamos was in Group A, with champions of Ghana, Hearts of Oak, a team that I'm sure many fans don't even recognize at this time, but at that time they were an African colossus. The Tunisian champions Etoile du Sahel, which is still no easy feat on any day, and Nigerian champions Eagle Cement, which at that time was a formidable foe. Group A wouldn't be easy. But I'll skip through the group stage drama and jump to the last group game, which came down to the wire and fittingly was to be completed at the National Sports Stadium, which Dynamos was using as its home ground at the time and was by now attracting bumper crowds in each assignment. It had come down to this: the Ghana boys were topping Group A with 10 points and simply had to avoid losing by 2 clear goals to second place Hearts of Oak, and they were in the final of the Champions League. Let me repeat that. They were going to be in the final of the Champions League. Now, at this stage, every Dynamos fan was a believer, and the National Sports Stadium attracted a formidable crowd, especially given that the match was an evening game on a Saturday, and I remember it vividly. It was the 7th of November 1998. I distinctly remember because it was my best friend's birthday, and I was organizing the birthday party. I rushed to arrange everything and left the venue at about 5 p.m. That's dropping off the food, the drinks, and everything. And I told Parkvo's mom and dad that I'll be back. I didn't even tell anyone where I was going because I needed to make that 6 p.m. kickoff. And yes, I was later to return to the party and celebrate in earnest. Under the lights at the giant facility, then still in its pomp, Dynamos put together a vintage show that was only dented by a lack of a goal for the home side. As the clock approached the 85th minute and the game goalless, the party had started in the stands already, as everyone could feel this was to be Dynamos' year. Now that they conceded a goal in the 87th minute made for a nervy finish, but only served to make this probably the sweetest 1-0 loss in Dynamos history, as it was enough to ensure that Dimbare Zimbabwe was in the final, finishing top of the group by goal difference. Dynamos was in the final of the Champions League. Now, hearing the Manning Rangers of South Africa had failed to pip ASIC Mimosas to winning Group B meant that for Dynamos to be the best in Africa, it would have to beat the best. This was ASIC Mimosas' side that was one of the richest and best funded teams in Africa. It had arguably the most organized structure and the leading academy on the continent. It boasted the young talents of Boubacar Barry, the legendary Ivory Coast national team goalkeeper for many years. They had the young Kolo Toure in the heart of their defense. We all know what he later on went on to do, and of course he was one of the invincibles of Arsenal. That's notwithstanding their fullback Siaka Tiene, the defensive midfielder Didier Zokora, one of the finest to play in the position on the continent, and of course the attacking talents of Aruna Dindane. You add to that Bonaventure Kalu, you had Emmanuel Ebue in that side. This was going to be a formidable foe. But this was Dynamos. It had Memory Mcherahoa Muyendamberi as the captain. Defensive pillars of Chamu Musano, Kaitano Tembo, Ngwenya at the heart of their defense. Kalisto, Pasua, Manabund, Lloyd Samaita Mtasa in midfield, Claudius Okoyo Zhiripai, my favorite, Lovemore Majens Ngube. Now, this was a midfielder so cool, calm and cultured. I would easily see him as the answer for JJ Okocha. Now, Dynamos had been able to sign him from Highlanders, where he was club captain that season, and he was signed along with Lenny Guata, and it was just in time for this amazing Champions League run. Up front, there was Makwinji Somapiri, Quinji 15, a man who had the best header in the game. A joke was often told that if Quinji was to take a penalty, he would probably use his head. The team could count on Tonderai TK Mtambikwa to chip in with goals as well, and the continental flavor was added by the Ghanaian George Owusu. But in the dugout, that's where the team had the secret weapon. The coach, Sunday Marimo Mofu, now known of course as Sunday Chidzambwa. He was a coach who had created a stingy, stoic, defense-minded tactical plan that was the match for anyone in the continent. And the whole country thought these blue men actually have a chance. Now, the first leg at the National Sports Stadium ended 0-0, and I can remember a chance in the first half where ASIC Mimosas' defensive mistake allowed Quinji 15 through on goal, but he sadly sent his effort wide. Notwithstanding that draw, it meant that Dimbare was now 90 minutes from achieving glory and becoming the first team to lift the continental title in the country. But a difficult away leg in Ivory Coast awaited, but we didn't want to think about that. All we wanted to do was celebrate the fact that we had drawn 0-0 against the best on the continent, and Simon Chimbetu belted out his greatest hits at the time after that match against ASIC Mimosas, and we all danced on the tartan track at the National Sports Stadium. Now, in the away leg, after some forays into the ASIC box and even forcing some saves from their keeper, the pedigree and ability of this side began to tell. Indeed, by the time Chamu Musanu chested the ball in his own 6-yard box into the path of the striker, it was only to give ASIC an insurmountable 4-0 lead with over 35 minutes still to play. The blue and white flowers of Mbare had wilted in the Ivory Coast blazing sun. A trademark header by Makwinji Somapiri and a sliding near post goal by George Owusu only served to make the scoreline respectable. The match ended 4-2 to ASIC Mimosas, and they were crowned African champions. Many of the ASIC youngsters went on to carve stellar careers in elite clubs like Arsenal in England for Ebue and Toure, in France and other top European outfits. But back home, the class of 98 will always remain the highlight of a golden generation. 10 years later, in 2008, ASIC Mimosas did fall at the hands of Dynamos in the Champions League. But the class of Edward Sadomba, Thomas Sheshe, Brighton Tuwai and Philip Marufu only managed to make it as far as the semi-finals, where they were undone by Cotton Sport of Cameroon, leaving us only to think when we reflect on the class of 98 and say, what if? What if that team had actually been able to get a result out of Ivory Coast? Either way, just like the name of the captain, Muchera Hoa, who made us dream, we will always have the memories. That's my golden moment, and I will treasure it always.
Z.
Barry made me a believer. Only he can make a 1-0 loss, which ensured Dynamos punched their ticket into the CAF Champions League final. Sound so sweet. Barry painted such a vivid picture. I felt like I was in the stadium for that goalless draw in the first leg against ASEC Mimosa in the final. And like he said, what if Dynamos had gotten a result from Ivory Coast? They would have been CAF Champions League champions. Imagine that. Now remember to hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. What's your most inspirational Zimbabwe sporting event? For now, let's catch up with local sports news. Paz has updates from netball, sports medicine, and the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League.
The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
Let's get into our local sports news roundup. We'll start with netball, and the Rainbow Amateur Netball League are starting to consider how to navigate the impact the coronavirus outbreak may have on their 2020 season. The Rainbow Amateur Netball League Secretary General Moses Kukuremi says the league is getting suggestions from their stakeholders on the way forward. The league was put on hold 2 weeks ago just after 3 rounds of matches. Sports medicine experts have warned athletes against questionable behavior and irresponsible eating habits during this 21-day lockdown period. They say athletes risk throwing their careers off the rails. ZiFM Medical Committee Chairman Edward Chagonda said athletes ought to be responsible on what they're doing during this period. All sporting activities in the country have been suspended due to a nationwide lockdown imposed by President Mnangagwa. This has forced athletes off their usual training routines, and most could be tempted to disregard individual practice session guidelines. Finally, to the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League, where Harare City Council have trimmed their workforce involved in the refurbishment of both Gwanzura and Rufaro in the face of national lockdown due to the coronavirus outbreak. The two grounds have not been cleared to host top-flight action by the ZiFM First Instance Board, but with at least a 2-month window presented to them following the suspension of the league program, the council officials intend to make big strides at the stadium. That's your local sports roundup.
Z. Hi, I'm Clemens Matau, chicken in midfielder. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
Alois Munjira, Gaza, our resident football pundit, scored goals during the 1995 All-Africa Games. He was part of a Zimbabwe under-23 side that captivated the imagination of the nation on home soil.
Hello, good evening everybody. Yeah, we are talking about the historic sporting events and sporting moments in Zimbabwe. You know, when it comes to that, what comes to mind for me is the 1995 All-Africa Games, you know, where we took part as the under-23s of Zimbabwe. You know, I was part of a team there. I think that was very historic in the first instance that it was, for me, I think it's the biggest event that we have ever hosted in Zimbabwe as a country. You know, in football, for me, it was bigger because I thought we did well. There were 8 teams in the tournament. 4 teams were playing in Group A in Harare, and 4 teams were playing in Group B in Bulawayo. So our first game was like wow, because for the first time I had never seen a stadium full to watch the young warriors, you know, the under-23s, and the stadium was packed to the rafters, and it was exciting. And you know, you get goosebumps when you see that as a player, you know, a packed stadium, people coming to watch you, you know, the Zimbabwean flag flying and all that. So we were pumped up. You know, we're playing against Egypt in the opening game of the tournament, and we beat them 2-1. And for me, it was actually bigger because I got to score the 2 goals for Zimbabwe, and it was fantastic at that time. And it set the stage. You know, it set the tone, you know, for a very, very big tournament, because suddenly every Zimbabwean was excited about the tournament, and they started supporting. They were behind the team and all that. We played our second game. We disappointed. You know, we lost to Zambia, and people were disappointed. But the third game, I think that third game is the most dramatic match that I've ever seen or I've ever witnessed, or most dramatic match that I know of. You know, talk of the European Champions League final, Bayern Munich versus Manchester United. This was more typical, but I think ours was even more dramatic. Guess what? We were losing. We had lost to Zambia in the second match, and we were losing 1-0 to Congo. You know, Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it was injury time. And we were still losing and we needed a win. A draw was not good enough for us. But guess what? In the last minute, we scored 2 goals in the last 2 minutes of injury time, and we managed to beat Congo with the last kick of the match by Elobedina, who scored the goal, the winner, and we won 2-1, and we proceeded to play in the semi-finals against Guinea. Then in the final, we played against Egypt. The National Sports Stadium was packed. 60,000 plus fans came to watch the Young Warriors play against Egypt. I think that they were expecting a lot from the Young Warriors, but guess what? It was not to be. But the occasion on its own was fantastic. You know, the president of Zimbabwe, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, was there. Kenan Banana, he was still the president as well. There, he was very big in football. He was there, and many dignitaries from Africa. You know, it was a very, very big event. And like I said, the stadium was packed. We lost to Egypt by 3-1. It was a low down. You know, I thought that we could have done better, but I think it was due to a little bit of lack of discipline on the part of the players. I think we didn't prepare well for that final match. But anyhow, we managed to win the silver medal. I think that was good for Zimbabwe. It was one of the best moments for Zimbabwean football as well, Zimbabwean sport, to get that silver. We still cherish it. We still look at the silver medal and say, yes, we did it. We got a silver in the All Africa Games 1995, although it was not good enough. But we can take that. For me, I think it remains as one of the most historic and most significant moments in Zimbabwean sport. You know, I'm not biased because I'm a football person, but I still believe that was one of the greatest moments. Of course, the All Africa Games involved a lot of other sports, but the highlight, of course, was football, and we did so well, and we made Zimbabwe proud of. We could have won it, but we still did Zimbabwe proud by getting that silver. So, like I said, I think it remains as one of the greatest sporting moments in Zimbabwe's history. Hopefully, one day we'll be talking about winning the Africa Cup of Nations somewhere in Africa. Probably that will supersede that one. But for now, I still think that the All Africa Games was the greatest moment, for me, rather, in the sporting history of Zimbabwe.
Alois Munjira was in that team with players like Chamu Musanu, Gift Mzazi, and even Shuto Stuart Marisa, and they went all the way to the final. Hans Mugumba Mangamaka Zara. It was chock-a-block with 60,000 people for the final. No doubt that silver medal for the under-23 Zimbabwe football team is one of the greatest achievements in the history of our nation. Remember, we are discussing Zimbabwe's most inspirational and historic sporting events. Hit us up on social media with your contribution. Coming up is Around the World in 60 with Chris, who will give us the latest updates in international sports. And after that, it's our power play on a Wednesday, Wacky Wednesday, the 1st of April. If you know, you know.
Around the World in 60 seconds. International sports news.
We begin in Sydney, where Australia cricket legend Shane Warne said Steve Smith should focus on batting and not being reinstated as Australia captain. Smith's 2-year leadership balance following the ball tampering scandal has elapsed, and now he's eligible to succeed Tim Payne as Test skipper. However, Warne says Payne should keep his job and insisted Smith is not the only candidate to replace the current captain in the event that a lack of runs sees the 35-year-old dropped. In news from Paris, Mercedes' revolutionary steering system has been banned for 2021, despite the regulation staying the same over the next 2 seasons. The move comes as part of a series of changes made by governing body FIA to tidy up the rules in response to the effects of the global coronavirus crisis. Mercedes' so-called dual-axis steering was said to be outlawed under the new rules for 2021 that have now been delayed. The change keeps the ban in place, even though teams will run 2020 cars next year. And we touched down in New York, where NFL owners have voted in favor of expanding the playoffs after players approved the new structure in the new collective bargaining agreement earlier this month. Owners arrived at the decision during a conference call which served as an alternative to the annual league meeting following its cancellation amid the coronavirus pandemic. The new approach will see the addition of one team from each conference in order to form 6 wildcard games in just one first-round bye for each conference, turning 12 playoff teams into 14.
Hi, my name is Sean Williams, Zimbabwe cricket captain. You're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Z. You are tuned into ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. This is day 3 of the lockdown edition of ZiFM Sport. Tonight we are talking about Zimbabwe's most inspirational sporting events. We've heard about Zimbabwe hosting the US in the Davis Cup in 2000 from Mike. Barry told us about Dynamos' CAF Champions League campaign in 1998, and Alois relived the All Africa Games in 1995. Let me now pass the baton to Paz, who was there in 1996 when the Zimbabwe cricket team whitewashed England.
So being a wacky Wednesday, we're looking at historical sporting events that the country has been involved with, and I've been given the ODI series between Zimbabwe and England that took place here in Zimbabwe in 1996-1997. Now, the English cricket team, they toured Zimbabwe for a 2-match test series and a 3-match one-day ODI series between the 15th of December 1996 and the 3rd of January 1997. The test series was drawn 0-0, and Zimbabwe won the ODI series 3-0. It was England's first senior tour of Zimbabwe, and I can still remember this as it was yesterday. It was one of my assignments as a sports journo working on the Hill at the time. So after this test series, England were really bitter and felt that they should have won both test matches. The coach then was now Bumble, as we all know Bumble, David Lloyd, who made that dramatic headline which covered the Herald front page, "We murdered them and they know it." Well, that headline set the tone for the ODI series. The first ODI, I was there at Queen Sports Club on the 15th of December 1996. Zimbabwe won the toss, asked England to bat, and promptly bowled them out for just 152 inside 46 overs. John Rennie, the pick of the Zimbabwe bowlers, picking up 3 for 27. In reply, Zimbabwe stuttered, getting to their total in 43 overs, 153 for 8, with Andy Bunduwala top scoring that day with 48. So Zimbabwe went 1-0 up in the series, and the series was then moved to the capital city, Harare, to Harare Sports Club for the final 2 one-day matches. The game had, the second ODI had rain interruptions, but England won the toss, made Zimbabwe bat. Zimbabwe were bowled out for 249 overs. Andy Flower top scoring with 63, and Darren Goff, who's now on TalkSport doing the drive time show, took 4 for 43. England then was set a revised target of 185 after the rain and fell 6 runs short, 179 for 7. This time it was leg spinner Paul Strang doing the damage with 3 for 24 from 9 overs. So it was game, set and match. Zimbabwe 2-0 up with 1 to play. And I think Zimbabwe really wanted to make it 3-0 and win the series in style. And well, that they did. England made Zimbabwe bat first in what was a better performance for Zimbabwe, passing 200 for the first time in the series. They finished on 249 for 7, with skipper Alistair Campbell leading from the front, making 80 not out. Then it was the innings of Zimbabwe, and all of us sitting in the press box will never forget. My good friend, part-time cricketer, chicken farmer from Rua, Edo Brandes, that tore England apart. England bowled out for 118, and Edo Brandes taking the first ever ODI hat-trick for Zimbabwe with 5 for 28 from his 10 overs. The hero for sure, and now who was murdered, shouted the fans across at Castle Corner. England returned to the UK, having been battered. Zimbabwe, and by their own press, and how could a chicken farmer come out and destroy England, were the headlines doing the rounds around the world. This was a real England team. We mustn't forget that. For those that will remember, it comprised the likes of Darren Goff, Chris Silverwood, who's now of course the England head coach, Nick Knight, commentator now on Sky, Nasser Hussain, Mike Atherton, Alex Stewart. They were all here in Zimbabwe in their magnificent series in 96-97. What a series that was, and one that will go in the record books for years to come. Hashtag keep safe, Zimbabwe.
Z. All right, confession. In 1996, I was only 4 years old, but Paz really set the scene for that magnificent triumph over England. Now, Paz mentioned Nasser Hussain, an England cricket legend who now works as a pundit. In a recent interview, Hussain said that ODI whitewash at the hands of Zimbabwe laid the foundation for the English Cricket Board's plans, which culminated in World Cup success last year. So, in a way, one of Zimbabwe's greatest sporting events is responsible for one of England's sporting events. I'll just leave it there. Now, last but certainly not least, let's hear from Chris, who takes us through the inspirational journey of the Zimbabwe netball team at the World Cup last year.
One of the most memorable occasions for Zimbabwean sport for me was the gems at the 2019 Netball World Cup. So let's take it back a little bit. August 2019, we found out that the gems had qualified for their maiden appearance at the Netball World Cup, which was going to be held in Liverpool in 2019, the following year. There's widespread celebration. People who had last talked about or heard about netball during their schooling years suddenly were talking about netball and what the gems had managed to do. Fast forward May 2019 and all of this celebration and good chatter turns to panic. So it turned out that between finding out that there was a World Cup the Gems had qualified for and the actual World Cup, there was very little done in the way of preparation for the team itself and for funding this journey. What we then saw was a panicky situation where several campaigns, there was crowdfunding, and some corporate sponsors came on board, and the Gems managed to make their way to Liverpool. Were the circumstances great? No, but they managed to get to Liverpool. And the speculation around their performance began, and we all wondered how they would perform. How would they perform competing against teams from better prepared nations with much more in the way of resources? But the Gems shut down any doubt around what they went to Liverpool to do with a 79-49 victory against Sri Lanka. The Gems had made a statement. They were not minnows, and they had come to Liverpool not only to compete, but to win. They did more than just set up Zimbabwe well in their World Cup run, that particular win. It gave Zimbabweans back home something positive, something to believe in, something to rally around at a time when Zimbabweans really needed something positive to believe in about their country. And in almost stark contrast, the Warriors were having an abysmal run at the Africa Cup of Nations. Similar issues, different results. Now, Coach Lloyd Makunde, cool, calm as usual, spoke repeatedly about his expectation for his team to win and their goal to finish within the top 7. And win after win, this became more of a realistic statement. The Gems thumped Northern Ireland, Barbados, and only slumped to the Diamonds of Australia and the Silver Ferns of New Zealand, who are the top-ranked teams in the world. So were we surprised about those losses? No. But what we saw was the Gems managing to hold their own in a competition where very little was expected from them. Now, much more than their on-court performance, the Gems had brought a winning mentality and such a spirit. Several videos were circulating of them singing their war cries as they entered the Vitality Stadium, being cheered along by their fans. And Zimbabweans based in the UK made their way to support the Gems in droves. They managed to place 8th at the World Cup, and Joyce Takaiza also found herself placed among the tournament's top scorers. Now, the Gems attracted a lot of attention at the World Cup, including Sky Sports' Tamsin Greenway, who said that there was no reason why Zimbabwe couldn't rise to the top as a big gun in the world of netball. She did mention, though, that it was crucial how Zimbabwe was going to handle and manage talent in the next 4 years. Former England Rose Pamela Cooley noted that the 12 players that the Gems brought to the World Cup were strong, but questioned what development structures existed to develop the players. Such statements absolutely foreboding, because we're close to 8 months since that stellar performance at the World Cup, and we still await decisions regarding how we'll develop the game. We've seen a lot of talk discussing fragmentation in netball in Zimbabwe. For me, this is where it gets a little bit passionate and personal. Zimbabwean sporting associations have responsibilities to players past, present, and future to develop this game. We have found a working formula. We know what we can do, and we need to develop the institutional memories to be able to take those lessons from the World Cup and advance them in the game of netball. More students need to be playing netball in various parts of the country. We need to be creating the infrastructure. And what structures exist beyond the schooling system in terms of retaining talent? How do we get continuous netball to be played in this country at the highest level? how do we continue to churn out world-class players? Zimbabwean corporates, I'm also calling you out here. You need to step up. Netball presents a great opportunity to create a legacy project. The once-off investments are great, but when it comes to sponsorship, we need to move beyond the one-time deals and slapping money in the name of corporate responsibility. We need to create foundations of sport development that outlast individuals. Instead, these should transcend generations. These should exist beyond you and I. They should exist beyond the current crop of players. We need our children to be able to dream, and they need something to believe in. They need something to look at, and this is what we need to be creating, our institutions. The Zimbabwean approach sport as once-off events that we prepare, for a few weeks. We throw some players into some sort of camp. This is not going to work because we're competing with nations that plan according to generations. This practice has got to die. This is so that our players like Adelaide Musque, Clarice Kwaramba, Felistus Kwangwa, Joyce Takaidza, Ndaizive Madzikangava, Patricia Mlaudi, Pauline Jani, Perpetua Siachitema, Rudo Karume, Charlene Mukusha, Sharon Bonali, and Ursula Ndlovu. These should not be a once-off team. Zimbabwe has done this before, and we could do it again. We just need to be conscious about how we want to develop. It has been done, and it can be done again.
The gems certainly sparkled at the Netball World Cup, competing with the best. Australia and New Zealand swatting aside Sri Lanka, Northern Ireland and Barbados to finish in above expectations 8th place. Now, I want to add on to the sporting list by including the mighty Warriors. They qualified for the 2016 Olympics in Rio. Remember that? Players such as Lauren Shamba, Marjorie Nyaung and Immaculate Musipa rubbed shoulders with the best playing nations in women's football. I mean, they played Germany with the likes of Zenifa Marajan and Sarah de Brits. They played against Canada, led by the world-class Christiane Sinclair, and they even played against the Matildas of Australia. And in all those games, they scored. So shout out to Kudakwashe Pasopo, Immaculate Musipa, and Mavis Chirandu, who have Olympic goals to their names. I certainly hope we can add on to this list of Zimbabwe's inspirational sporting events. We need to qualify for more global tournaments and have more iconic moments in the world of sport. I mean, Zimbabwe has so much more to offer, and someday, I hope one of those will culminate in the Zimbabwe Warriors qualifying for the World Cup. Our last stop is with updates in the beautiful game. Barry will give us the latest football news in the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, and the Bundesliga.
The big leagues, the big teams, the big players. The beautiful game on ZiFM Sport. All the rivalry.
Here is Harry Kane for Tottenham. Oh, what a goal! A classic derby goal from Harry Kane. Catch him if you can.
All the stars.
Back heels Liverpool 2 in front. Talk about impudence. Talk about improvisation. Talk about Sadio Mane.
And all the game-changing moments.
And Raheem Sterling rattles it home. And once more, City are in front in a trice.
All the updates from the Premier League on ZiFM Sport.
Our look at the beautiful game, of course, starts with the Premier League, where Manchester United are prepared to make a renewed bid to sign Juventus defender Matthias de Ligt during the end-of-season transfer window. If the Italian club are ready to listen to offers for the Netherlands international, de Ligt rejected interest from United, Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain at the end of last season before completing a €75 million move from Ajax to Juventus after he captained the Dutch champions during their run to the Champions League semi-finals last season. Sources say manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, OGS, is keen to recruit a centre-back, and the club have already drawn up a list of potential targets, including Napoli's Kalidou Koulibaly. That will be a good signing, Matthias de Ligt, for Manchester United. I've got to think to yourself that their defence certainly needs a boost. They've already got Harry Maguire. He's done reasonably well, but if he gets a quality centre-half to stand next to him, you've got to think to yourself they will have the defence that will likely give them a good boost going into the new season.
The league that makes football oh so beautiful. where artistry and strokes of genius are the order of any day. Where the game is played with a smile and the little master creates his magic.
Lionel Messi!
All the news from the Spanish La Liga on ZiFM Sport.
In La Liga, Barcelona president Josep Maria Bartomeu has said the coronavirus pandemic will have huge consequences on the transfer market, including an increase in swap deals, but insists the club will still be able to sign the game's biggest stars. Barca players have already agreed to a temporary 70% pay cut as measures are taken to help minimize the effects of the health crisis on the club's finances. Bartomeu is hopeful that football will be able to resume during the European summer and that both La Liga and the Champions League can be completed. He's also against matches being played behind closed doors. Perhaps him saying that the club will still be able to sign the game's biggest stars is a sign and also directional that Neymar could be on his way back to Barcelona. Certainly all the fans of the Catalan club will be hoping so, because Neymar will be a good addition.
The Nerazzurri, the Black and Blues, Inter Milan.
It's Romelu Lukaku, and it was never in doubt. He's a beast at the best of times, but this season he has become a monster.
The Giallorossi, the Yellow and Reds, AS Roma.
Belotti has a go! Tremendous hits! That's what he's capable of.
La Viola, the Purple Ones, Fiorentina.
Franck Ribéry seals a glorious win for Fiorentina with a sumptuous goal at San Siro.
The Bianconeri, the Black and Whites, Juventus.
Ronaldo seals yet another 3 points for Juventus.
Tough yet colourful. The best of Italian football on Z.
Italy's next now Internazionale goalkeeper Samir Handanovic is desperate to win trophies with Inter because you cannot live off memories. That's a quote from him. Inter captain Handanovic joined from Udinese in 2012 but is yet to lift any silverware during his time at San Siro. The Nerazzurri looked like early contenders for the Serie A title this season, but lost ground to Juventus and Lazio before the coronavirus outbreak brought play to a halt, and they are 9 points off the top with a game in hand. They'll be hoping that they can certainly lift some trophies, and I don't think it's just Handanovic who's hoping for that. The entire Inter family wants trophies to be lifted, and indeed, Italian football sorely needs that.
Horsepower unmatched. Torque to beat the best. Speed unrivaled. Sleek and easy on the eye. Let's get behind the wheel of football engineered to perfection. The Bundesliga, made in Germany.
We finish off in Germany, where German League CEO Christian Seifert has suggested fans will not be readmitted into football stadiums in the country for the rest of 2020. On the 13th of March, only hours before the start of the 26th match day, the DFL postponed all leagues amid the coronavirus outbreak in Germany. The upper two tiers were initially suspended until early April, but with the crisis worsening, the DFL agreed that a general meeting via a video conference that it will not be possible for football to return until at least the 30th of April. And Seifert added that when football does return to the country, it is unlikely to be played in front of supporters for an initial period. That is sad because the fans in Germany certainly make the German game that much more special. As Mike said on yesterday's show, it's really the packaging of the English game that makes it seem like the atmosphere at English stadiums is better than the German ones, but the German stadiums are made by that atmosphere, and if we can't get that atmosphere, it certainly will be a different game in Germany. That's your football roundup.
Z.
So, one word to describe the show: inspirational. We'll be back tomorrow for ZiFM Sport. If you want to continue the nostalgia, we are at ZiFM Sport on Facebook and Twitter. You can reach us directly by just searching for our names: Barry Manandi, Mike Madoda, Alois Bunjira, Mark Paus, Chris, and myself, Sean Tafirenyika. For now, take care of yourself and stay safe.